The Central Bank of Nigeria directs commercial banks in the country to work on Saturdays to enable bank customers return old Naira notes for new ones, following the CBN's plan to redesign, produce, release, and circulate new series of banknotes on December 15, 2022, and the existing note ceased to be a legal tender from January 31st, 2023. The deposit money banks have been directed to immediately start returning the existing currencies to the bank. According to the Director of Corporate Communications of the Apex Bank, Mr. Osita Wanisobi, the deposit money banks have also been instructed to receive the existing banknotes beyond the threshold stipulated by the cashless policy without charges to customers. He also reiterates emphasis on the purpose of redesigning the Naira notes, which is to achieve macroeconomic stability, noting that the efforts entailed building a strong, stable, and resilient economy that will be self-sustaining and able to weather anticipated shocks. Meanwhile, the Debt Management Office says there is need for the federal government to moderate the rising trends of borrowing to ensure debt sustainability in the country. Director General of the DMO, Mrs. Patience Oneha, at an event urged the federal government to take steps to rationalize expenditure, accelerate growth in revenues, and ensure that borrowings are tied to projects that generate commensurate revenue to service the loans cost. The outlook shows that the local and international markets are becoming tighter and interest rates are rising. The DMO Director General further explains that Nigeria's low revenue base is compounded by dependence on crude oil, resulting in deficits over the past decades. She, however, notes that efforts are increasing non-oil exports are yielding positive results and should be encouraged. The Federation Accounts Allocation Committee Post-Mortem Subcommittee says the rise in public debt is worrisome while describing fuel subsidy as unsustainable. According to the committee, removing fuel subsidy will improve government revenues, reduce inflation, which will significantly impact low-income households by reducing their cost of living. The committee also noted that evaluating issues emanating from the Federation accounts from January 2019 to September 2022, the contribution of oil revenues to Federation accounts revenue had been challenged by structural constraints bedeviling the oil sector, including unsustainable subsidy on petrol operating as the first line against gross oil revenues. FAC for their advice that the downstream operations of the petroleum industry should be fully deregulated to provide for the removal of subsidy. The Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Mohammed Abubakar, is calling for more adequate support to be given to agricultural development to further drive existing interventions by the authorities. Minister made this known while speaking at the Farmers' Day celebration in Abuja. Laura Afolayan was there.
In the name of God, we launch all this.
Celebration of the National Farmers' Day with the theme Farmers' Development, a panacea to Nigeria's economic impasse. It is a day set aside to celebrate farmers and acknowledge their contributions to national development.
The day pays tribute to the men, women, and families who put foods in the grocery stores and on our tables every day. This event is indeed to achieve sustainable food security and job creation.
The agricultural authorities say the relevance and the importance of farming to food security and economic development cannot be overemphasized. There is therefore an urgent need to extend to it all the support it deserves.
And everyone to support farmers association, especially women and youth, because the smallholder farmers, which consists of women and youth, constitute about 70% of the production of food in this country. And we cannot do without the smallholder farmers. So the
authorities highlight their efforts towards improving the lot of the country's farmers, but a lot still needs to be done. The farmers also share thoughts on areas of urgent intervention in the industry.
So the ministry has been working with smallholder farmers, but with farmers in general, even the commercial farmers, to make sure that we achieve the objectives of His Excellency Mr. President to move the country forward through agricultural diversification of the economy.
To meet with each other, most especially agro-allied industries and many other agricultural stakeholders, to establish linkages and strategies as we take farming to the next level as business.
To value chain from ranching, processing, marketing, all sort of value chain that is attached to cattle is being looked critically into. We know a lot of problems that is being caused as a result of this value chain.
Calls for better support for agriculture by the authorities and the farmers is coming against the backdrop of perennial floods that have ravaged farmlands across the country this year and caused huge production losses. Lara Folayo, TVC News, Abuja.
Asian shares were in cautious mood today after U.S. Federal Reserve officials fired more warning shots on interest rates while raising coronavirus cases in China and liquidity strains in its bond market added to uncertainty. The bond market's warnings of recession are not exactly what Wall Street wanted to hear as the left S&P 500 features flat, Nasdaq features inched up 0.1%, Eurostock 50 features adding 0.7%, FTSE features gaining 0.3%, MSCI's broadest index of Asian Pacific shares outside Japan bounced up 0.5% after slipping for 2 sessions, while Chinese blue chips were flat and reports that Beijing had asked banks to check liquidity in the bonds market after soaring yields caused losses for some investors. Japan's Nikkei nudged up 0.1% as data showed inflation running at 40-year high as a weak yuan stopped import costs. In other news, the Federal Reserve is set to raise its federal funds rate by 0.5 percentage points, between 4.25% and 4.5% range, at its next policy meeting scheduled to hold December 13th to 14th this year. The monetary policy will downshift to deliver 50 basis points interest rate hikes, but data shows that a longer period of U.S. central banks tightening and a higher policy rate peak are the greatest risk to the current outlook. When U.S. consumer price inflation unexpectedly fell below 8% last month, reinforcing market expectations, the Fed went for smaller rate hikes going forward, about 4 consecutive 75 basis points increases. The European Central Bank is set to begin the biggest withdrawal of cash from the Eurozone's banking system today. The move, according to the report, is part of ECB's efforts to fight record high inflation in the Eurozone by raising the cost of credit and first step towards trimming its multi-trillion euro bond portfolio. Also, the Eurozone Central Bank will announce how much banks will repay of the 2.1 trillion euros multi-year credit that they have taken under its targeted long-term refinancing operations, which reimbursement is voluntary. Crude oil prices pared early gains and was on track for a steep weekly decline on concerns about weakening demand in China and further interest rate rises. But the U.S. Federal Reserve's U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude rose today to sell at $81.93 per barrel, with an upward price review of 0.36%. Brent crude futures experienced an uptick of 0.04%, selling at $89.82. Bonnet Light sells for $90.39 with a decline of 1.72%. For the OPEC basket, crude dealers offer $91.72 with an upward price review of 0.61%.